The night in Ember Creek smelled like rain that had not yet found the courage to fall. Lark Mercer stepped onto the little stage at the Gilded Lantern with a hand around the cool neck of her silver microphone. Her dress caught the lamplight the way a creek catches dawn. In the mirror behind the bar, smoke drifted like old ghosts that had learned to dance. She sang a low song about long roads and boots too tired to lie. Men turned on their stools. Cards slowed in the air. The piano man, Wally Finch, rolled his shoulders and gave her room. She let the melody curl soft and easy. A hush gathered. Outside, wind pressed its ear to the window. That was when he walked in. Colter Hayes pushed the batwings with one calloused hand and paused just inside. Dust clung to him like a memory. Hat brim low, coat dark from a far ride. He did not stride the way some men did when they wanted to be seen. He moved like the desert itself. Quiet, inevitable. Lark felt his presence settle in her chest before she saw his eyes. She never lost a verse. Not once. But her breath hitched on a single word. Only she heard it. Only he noticed. He lifted his gaze, and the room thinned to a circle of air where only two hearts knew the rhythm. Colter took a place in the shadow near the back, where the lamplight frayed into dusk. He did not drink. He watched. Lark sang on and let the song pour heat into the chill that rose along her bare arms. Long nights had taught her to separate the stage from the girl who lived behind her ribs. Tonight those borders softened. When the song ended, the crowd let out a low cheer. Coins clinked into the glass jar. Maeve Duval, who ran the lantern with a velvet fist, flicked her fan once more. Lark dipped her head and gave the room a smile that had saved her more than once. Then she chose a slow number that tasted like smoke and rain. The piano found a riverbed of notes. The lamps hummed. Halfway through, the front door cracked again. Deputy Bram Kincaid stepped in with a face that had never learned to laugh. His badge caught firelight. His voice did too. He told Maeve that danger rode the North Road. A ranch foreman cut down near Split Butte. The room stiffened around the edges. No one left. Not while Lark was mid-song, not while danger was still only a rumor with boots. But then she whispered. It was not to anyone. It was to herself, tucked inside the lyric, "I am not running." The words were so soft, they felt like silence changing its mind. Colter heard. He shifted one shoulder as if laying down a weight. When her eyes brushed him, he did not look away. She thought of hard country, of men who wore their pasts like old scars under their coats. She thought of the first time she sang to her own fear and found it listening, calm for the first time. The song ended. Applause rose, warm as whiskey. Maeve sent a girl with a tray to collect. Lark reached for her glass of water. Her hand was steady again. Then Colter stepped forward from the shadow. He stopped a pace from the stage and tipped his hat. His voice was low and rough, the kind that learned to speak only when it had to. "Thank you for the second song," he said. "The first one was for the room. The second was for anyone brave enough to hear it." Lark felt heat rise in her throat. She had been called pretty, sweet, a smoke angel, but never brave. She answered with a small smile that hid and revealed at once. "Brave is cheap if it only works on stage." He nodded. "Then make me believe it works anywhere." Maeve's fan snapped once. Lark read the message. Keep it charming. Keep it safe. She should have turned back to the crowd. She should have asked for requests. Instead, she looked at the stranger with dust on his coat and a silence that felt like shelter rather than threat. "What is your name, cowboy?" "Colter Hayes." The name carried a slow thunder. A couple of men near the door exchanged looks. Wally played a gentle fill, as if to cover the sound of the town taking notice. Colter did not flinch. He lifted his chin toward the corner table. "May I sit while you sing one more?" She could have said no. She could have kept the night tidy. But the wind along the siding changed pitch, and something inside her changed with it. "Sit," she said, "if you promise to listen with both ears." His mouth curved. "I only brought 2. She sang again. Not the heat of a crowd pleaser, a softer road, a firelight road. Words about second chances that did not ask permission. Colter listened the way men listen when it might be the last good thing they hear for a while. Lark felt his attention like a hand placed gently at the small of her back, guiding her through a doorway she had never tried. Bram Kincaid drifted closer to Maeve. He spoke low. Maeve did not look at him. She fixed on Lark. Maeve had pulled Lark out of worse nights. She had also warned her about men who carried storms in their bones. Lark did not need the warning tonight. She could feel the weather change for herself. It rose off Colter like heat from canyon rock, dangerous but not careless, worn but not broken, the kind of man who would stand between a stranger and a stray bullet just because he was in the way. Between verses, Lark let a quiet thought slip loose. The desert teaches us to trust the slow things, a branch that bends, a horse that breathes, a man who does not rush the door he means to open. The line sounded like part of the lyric. It also sounded like truth. She closed the song with a note that fell gentle as dust. The room exhaled. Coins rang again. Maeve's fan moved softer now. Lark stepped off the stage for a short rest. Colter stood. He did not reach for her. He did not crowd her space. He left his hat on the table so his hands had nothing to hide behind. "Trouble on the North Road," he said. "I passed the sign of it at Split Butte. Blood where it did not belong. Men riding fast without lanterns. I came in to warn whoever ran this place." Maeve heard from across the room. She came with her fan and that level gaze. "You did well to tell me, Mr. Hayes. We close earlier when the night grows teeth." Colter glanced at Lark for a heartbeat, then back to Maeve. Teeth or not, the singer should not walk home alone. Lark laughed. It sounded softer than she meant. "I do not walk, Mr. Hayes. I live upstairs. But thank you for the gallant worry." His eyes held hers. Worry comes easy when the song feels like it belongs to you. She felt that sentence all along her skin. The piano started another tune for the room. The crowd's attention drifted. Their world narrowed. Bram Kincaid cut in with the brittle edge of a man who hated being ignored. "Mr. Hayes, the sheriff, may want a word come morning. Men who start their nights at Split Butte rarely end them clean." Colter's mouth did not harden. His voice did not rise. "Then he can have his word. I kept mine. I warned. Now I will finish what I came to do." Lark lifted a brow. "And what is that?" He gave the smallest answer a man could give and still tell the truth. "Listen. and keep you safe while I do." Silence moved through her. It did not frighten. It settled. She felt the world tip an inch toward a road she had avoided out of habit and old harm. She had been someone's decoration once, someone's prize. She would not be that again. But safety spoken without hunger sounded like water in August. The lamps fluttered. Wind rose at last. Thunder found the ridge. Lark looked toward the staircase that led to her small room above the saloon. She looked back at Colter Hayes, who seemed to understand that some doors must be opened from the inside. She gave him a nod so slight only a man who had been watching all night would see it. "Stay for the next set," she said. "If the storm breaks, it will be good to have a steady presence near the stage." The first fat drops hit the windows. The crowd murmured. Maeve lifted her chin, counting the minutes until she would call it early. Lark stepped toward the stairs to fetch a fresh shawl. Outside, the wind gathered like a rider climbing into the saddle. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The night still has more to tell. Your listening keeps this fire burning for the next part. The storm hit Ember Creek like a confession. Sudden, loud, and full of truths the sky could no longer keep. Rain slashed against the saloon windows. Thunder rolled across the flats. Upstairs, Lark lit the single oil lamp beside her narrow bed and watched the flame sway with the wind's temper. She peeled off her stage dress and slipped into a worn cotton shift. The sequins on the gown winked back at her from the chair, relics of a woman who needed to shine so no one would see the cracks. Below, the piano stumbled through a tune, then gave up when the thunder stole its rhythm. She heard voices, Maeve locking the cash drawer, Bram muttering something about the sheriff, and one deeper tone that did not need to raise itself to be heard, Colter's. That sound travelled up through the floorboards like heat. Lark told herself she was only listening because danger rode the North Road, because she was sensible, but her pulse said otherwise. She crossed to the small window that faced Main Street. Through the rain-smeared glass, she caught the flicker of a lantern and the blur of Colter's coat as he helped Maeve drag barrels against the doors. Every movement of his body spoke of purpose, not pride. He was the kind of man who built calm out of chaos and never asked to be thanked for it. When Maeve finally sent the others home, Colter stayed behind. Lark watched him lean his shoulder against the doorframe, hat low, waiting for the storm to decide if it meant harm or not. A memory brushed her. The sound of another storm, another man years ago. A gambler who swore he loved her, right up until his luck ran dry and the sheriff's bullets did not. Since then, thunder had always sounded like goodbye. Tonight, it didn't. It sounded like something beginning. A soft knock broke her thoughts. "Miss Mercer," Colter's voice came low from the other side. Maeve said to check the upstairs windows, the winds shifting east. She opened the door just enough for lamplight to fall across his face. He was damp from the rain, coat darkened, hair curling against his temples. No swagger, no smile, just steady eyes and the scent of wet leather and horse. "I think the glass will hold," she said. He nodded once. "Still, best to keep the shutters tight. Nights like this bring more than weather." She tilted her head. "And what else do they bring, Mr. Hayes?" He looked past her into the small room, as if weighing how much truth belonged there. "Memories," he said finally. and men who think the dark owes them a favor. Lark stepped aside. "You can check the latch yourself if you like." He entered carefully, boots leaving small ghosts of mud on her floor. She felt the air change, quieter somehow, though the rain outside hadn't softened. He moved to the window, tested the latch, then turned back. "This room's a thin line between you and the world," he murmured. "I've lived behind thinner," she said, folding her arms. Colter smiled, a tired, honest curve that did not reach for charm. "Then you've lived hard. Long enough to know the difference between danger and warning. And what am I?" Lark met his gaze. "Still deciding?" For a long breath, only the rain answered. He looked at her the way a man looks at a river before he crosses, studying where it runs deep, where it might drown him, and stepping forward anyway. "I don't aim to cause trouble," he said. "Then you're already different from most men who say good evening at my door." That drew the faintest laugh from him. It filled the room warmer than the lamp. He nodded toward the stage dress on the chair. "You shine down there like a woman born of light. Hard to remember that fire burns if you stand too close." Lark looked at the gown, the sequins now dull in the lamplight. "Light's a trick," she said softly. "It hides what it can't fix." Colter's expression shifted, something between understanding and ache. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's just the only thing that keeps the dark honest." Outside, the thunder softened, stretching farther away. She moved to the window beside him, the air between them humming like a live wire. "Why'd you really come to Ember Creek?" she asked. He hesitated, thumb running along the edge of his glove. "Looking for a man who doesn't want to be found." "An outlaw?" "A ghost with debts." His eyes were far for a moment, then came back to her. "He took something that wasn't his, and left something behind I can't forget." Lark didn't ask what. Some wounds weren't meant for names. Downstairs, a shutter banged loose. Colter moved toward the sound, but she caught his sleeve, just enough to stop him for a breath. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being the kind of man who notices the latch before the storm breaks." He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. "Storm's not over yet, Miss Mercer." "I know," she said. "But maybe it doesn't have to be a bad one." The words hung between them, trembling like the lamp flame. Then he went downstairs, boots echoing slow on the steps. Lark stood alone by the window. She watched the rain blur the world into watercolor, soft edges, new shapes. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Below, she heard Colter's voice again, steady, patient, and the faint scrape of wood against wood as he secured the final shutter. "A man who built peace out of pieces," she whispered to the glass, not sure if she meant it for him or herself. "Some storms wash more than they break." Lightning flared, and the whole saloon glowed for one heartbeat, as if the desert itself was listening. If this story has found a quiet place inside you, stay close. The rain has not finished its tale, and the firelight downstairs still waits for the next part. The morning came slow, like it wasn't sure the town deserved the light. Rain had rinsed the dust off Ember Creek, leaving the streets slick and shining like black glass. Lark stood at the window of her small room, the last curl of sleep still soft in her hair, and watched steam rise from the wet boards below. Colter Hayes was already outside. She could see him through the open slats. Coat off, shirt damp at the collar, helping Maeve's stable boy reset the horse rail. His movements were measured, patient, the kind that made hard work look like prayer. He paused once to glance up toward her window. Lark stepped back, pretending to fix her hair, heart tripping faster than it had on any stage. She wasn't used to being seen in daylight. Night gave her safety. Its smoke and lamplight softened everything. Morning, though. Morning was honest. Maeve knocked once and came in without waiting. She always did. "Got a storm report, sweetheart. Split Butte's a mess. Sheriff's men found 2 dead and 1 missing." Lark turned, fingers still tangled in her hair. "Missing who?" Maeve fanned herself once. Slow. "They didn't say, but Colter's name came up when Bram was in my office." Lark felt her throat tighten. "They think he did it." Maeve lifted a brow. "Men like him don't walk into saloons for the fun of it. He's carrying something heavy, Lark. Don't let those quiet eyes fool you." Lark tried to smile it off, but her hands betrayed her, twisting her shawl until it wrinkled. Maeve touched her arm, softer now. "I know that look. And the one that wants to save a man already halfway to ruin? Just don't climb down into his storm, baby. Let him climb out if he can." When Maeve left, the room felt smaller, the silence thicker. Lark looked again toward the street, but Colter was gone. Only his horse remained, a dark bay with rain-dried streaks along its flank. She told herself she wasn't disappointed, but the ache in her chest disagreed. She dressed for the day. Plain skirt, linen blouse, hair tied back with a ribbon the color of dusk. By noon, the gilded lantern was half awake again. Maeve handled the ledgers. The piano man nursed a hangover. Bram Kincaid came by, his boots leaving puddles by the door, his jaw tight with duty. He saw Lark at the bar and touched his hat. "Morning, Miss Mercer. Seen our new friend today?" Lark wiped a glass that was already clean. "He was out front earlier." Bram leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You be careful." Hayes rode in from the North Trail, and that trail's been bleeding trouble. One of the ranchers near Split Butte lost a payroll satchel and 3 men. The ones left breathing said the robber wore a dark coat and rode a bay. Lark looked him dead in the eye. "And you think that's proof?" Bram shrugged. "I think it's reason enough to keep your door locked at night." He tipped his hat again and left. She set the glass down hard enough to crack it. Men always came with warnings, but Colter's had sounded different. Not a threat, a promise to protect, even if no one had asked him to. When she stepped outside later, the air still carried the smell of wet cedar and iron. She walked toward the corral behind the saloon. The horse lifted its head as she approached. "Hey, handsome," she whispered. "Where's your rider gone?" "Behind you," came his voice. Lark turned, startled. Colter stood near the gate, sleeves rolled, a fresh scrape along his cheekbone. The kind of mark that spoke of a fight no one saw coming. "You move quiet for a man your size," she said. He smiled faintly. "Old habit. Noise draws bullets." She stepped closer, studying the cut. "Did the storm hit you harder than it hit the town?" "Something like that." He leaned against the rail, eyes on the horizon. "Found tracks heading west from Split Butte. The man I'm hunting passed through before the shooting started. I think he rode with company. And now the sheriff thinks it's you." His jaw flexed once. "Wouldn't be the first time a badge aimed wrong." She hesitated, then asked the question anyway. "And is it wrong this time?" He turned his gaze on her, slow, steady, without flinch or anger. "Yes, ma'am. But I've been on both sides of that question before. Makes a man quiet about how he answers it." The wind pushed a strand of her hair across her face. He reached without thinking, brushed it back with the gentlest touch. Rough hand, soft motion. The contact lasted barely a heartbeat, but something inside her steadied. "That's twice you've looked at me like I'm someone you remember," she said. He shook his head. "No, someone I wish I'd met sooner." The world seemed to tilt. Somewhere nearby, the piano stumbled into a lazy tune that didn't match the hour. Lark smiled faintly. "You shouldn't say things like that, Mr. Hayes. Words like that stick." He studied her face, the rain glow still lingering on her skin. Maybe they should. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It breathed. Finally, she said, "Maeve thinks you're trouble. She's not wrong. And yet, here you are, trying to make sure trouble stops before it hits your door." Her eyes softened. "Why mine?" He looked past her toward the saloon windows where her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. "Because you sing like a woman who's forgotten how to run." The words cut clean and deep. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but something in his voice, that gravel and tenderness mixed, held her still. "I stopped running," she said quietly, "because the road never led anywhere worth staying." He nodded. "Maybe it's not the road's fault. Maybe it's the company." Thunder murmured again, far off this time. Colter adjusted his saddle strap, preparing to ride. "I'll be out toward the ridge till nightfall. If the sheriff asks, tell him I don't run either. Will you come back?" He smiled without showing teeth. "If the song's still playing." She watched him mount up and ride toward the horizon, dust and light chasing each other over the plain. Her chest felt tight, the kind of ache that wasn't pain, but recognition. Maeve's voice drifted from the doorway. "Don't fall for him, baby. Men like that leave before the ink dries on your heart." Lark turned, eyes still on the road. "Maybe, but sometimes they leave something worth keeping." She went back inside, humming the melody she'd written in her head since dawn, one about storms, ghosts, and men who ride into a woman's silence like sunrise breaking through. Outside, a hawk circled above the ridge where Colter had gone. The wind carried dust and the promise of another reckoning. If this story has touched a quiet corner of your soul, keep listening. The horizon still holds what neither of them dares to name. The sun was low by the time Colter Hayes returned to Ember Creek. The horizon burned orange behind the hills, the kind of light that turned dust into gold and every shadow into a secret. He rode slow, as if the horse knew not to hurry back to a town that whispered his name with both gratitude and suspicion. Lark saw him before anyone else did. She was sweeping the porch of the Gilded Lantern, apron tied loose around her waist, sleeves rolled up. The air smelled like wood smoke and rain that hadn't fallen. When his silhouette appeared against the fading light, her chest tightened the way it used to before the first note of a song. He dismounted in silence, dust trailing off his coat. "Evening, Miss Mercer." Even in Mr. Hayes, she said, eyes following the scrape on his cheek. You look like the Ridge didn't take kindly to your company. Colter half smiled. The Ridge and I came to an understanding. The men riding through it didn't. She leaned the broom against the wall. You found them? I found their tracks. 3 riders. They split near the river. One of them carried the missing satchel. And the sheriff still thinks it's you. Wouldn't be the first time a man got the wrong story stuck in his head. Lark crossed her arms, her voice softer now. And the truth? He looked up at her, steady as ever. The truth don't always ride as fast as lies. The door opened behind her. Maeve stepped out, fan in hand, eyes sharp as glass. Mr. Hayes, she said, you've been busy drawing curiosity to my establishment. I'd prefer if you didn't hang your trouble on my porch. Colter tipped his hat. Ma'am, I don't aim to bring any. Maeve's fan fluttered once. Then take that aim elsewhere. Lark felt the tension pull between them like a wire. He's done nothing wrong, Maeve. Maeve's eyes cut to her. And you've known him how long? 2 songs and a thunderstorm? Lark flushed, but her chin stayed high. Sometimes that's all it takes to know a man means no harm. Maeve sighed, snapping her fan shut. You've always had a heart that listens louder than your head. Just don't let it drown you again. She turned and went back inside. Colter looked after her, then back at Lark. She's right to be cautious. Maybe, but she doesn't hear what I do. And what's that? You don't talk like a man running from the law. You talk like a man running from himself. He froze for half a heartbeat. Then said quietly, Maybe that's worse. Lark stepped closer, her voice barely above the creak of the porch boards. Then maybe it's time to stop. A long pause. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and the wind changed direction. Colter's eyes searched hers, not for permission, but for truth. You ever stop, Miss Mercer? Once, she said. Didn't go well. He nodded, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Then you know the road don't forgive easy. Neither do I, she answered. They stood there in the quiet between words, the air heavy with what neither dared to say. Finally he cleared his throat. I'll be leaving come dawn. There's a trail that cuts through the mesa. Might lead me to the men I'm after. Lark's voice softened. And if it doesn't? Then I'll keep riding till it does. She studied him, the tired lines at the corner of his eyes, the weight in his posture. You ever think about stopping for something other than revenge? He hesitated. Once, he said. About 5 minutes ago. Her heart tripped. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Then you shouldn't ask questions you already know the answers to. Maeve's piano man struck up a tune inside, slow and aching, the kind of melody that fills all the cracks between courage and fear. Lark exhaled, glancing toward the doorway. You staying for the set? He shook his head. Not tonight. A man should leave before the song turns against him. Maybe it already has, she said softly. He paused halfway to his horse. Meaning? Meaning some songs don't end when the music stops. He looked at her a long while, eyes unreadable in the fading light. Then he touched the brim of his hat. You got a way of making a man forget where the trail starts. And you've got a way of reminding a woman what danger feels like when it's honest. He mounted up. Honest danger's still danger. Maybe that's the only kind worth trusting. The wind carried her words after him as he rode out toward the mesas. The sky dimmed from gold to violet. Lark watched until the dust settled, until his shape vanished into the far line of the earth. She didn't know it yet, but before the night was over, someone else would ride into town, and bring with them the very storm Colter had been chasing. Back inside, Maeve was counting coins, muttering to herself. Lark stepped behind the bar, her mind 1,000 miles from the saloon. She could still feel the echo of his voice, the weight of his gaze. "Lark," Maeve said suddenly, not looking up. "Lock the door early tonight. I've got a bad feeling." Lark nodded, though her thoughts were far beyond the lock and the door. Outside, the wind picked up again. The lanterns flickered. And somewhere out on the open plain, lightning flashed. Not in the sky this time, but close. Too close. She whispered to herself a line she didn't know she'd spoken aloud. "Some storms don't chase us. They come home." If this story has stirred a quiet fire in your chest, stay with it. The night's about to break wide open, and the truth riding in will change everything. The wind carried the storm in before midnight. Not rain this time, something harder, sharper. A kind of silence that meant trouble was coming on horseback. Lark stood behind the bar, polishing a glass that didn't need polishing, her eyes drifting to the door every time it groaned in the wind. Maeve had already sent most of the crowd home, the last drunk carried out by the stable boy. Only the piano man stayed, half asleep over his keys, his fingers wandering through a melody slow as breathing. Then the lamps flickered. Boots. 3 sets. Heavy. Wet. The door swung open, and a gust of cold rode in first. 3 men entered, slick with dust and thunder. Their coats were long, their faces shadowed. One had a scar that pulled his lip into a crooked sneer. Another carried a rifle like he meant to use it. The third man, taller, eyes like river ice, smiled when he saw her. "Well, if it ain't Ember Creek's nightingale," he said, voice low and mean. "Heard you sing a tune or two that could make a man forget his sins." Lark set the glass down, calm on the outside, heartbeat loud enough to drown the piano. "Bar's closed," she said. The man laughed. "I didn't ride all this way for whiskey." His gaze drifted up the stairs, then back to her. "We're looking for someone. Tall, rides a bay, answers to Hayes." Maeve stepped from the back room before Lark could answer, fan snapping open like a blade. "You'll find no one of that name here." The man's grin sharpened. "That's so. Funny thing, his horse was tied out back an hour ago." Lark's breath caught. She hadn't seen Colter since sunset. But his horse, he'd left it in the corral. The man took a step closer. "He's got something that ain't his, a bag full of bills that belonged to Split Butte." Maeve's fan stilled. "Then maybe you ought to talk to the sheriff," he chuckled. "Oh, I plan to, after I talk to him." He slammed his hand on the counter. The sound cracked through the saloon like a gunshot. Lark flinched. The piano man stopped playing. "I'll ask nice once more," the man said. "Where's Colter Hayes?" Lark met his stare. "If I knew, I'd tell him not to waste his time answering to you." The room froze. For a heartbeat, nothing moved but the flame trembling in the nearest lamp. Then the man reached across the counter, grabbed her wrist. Too tight, too sudden. Pretty thing, like you shouldn't talk brave on a night like this. Before she could pull away, the door behind him slammed open again. A single word followed it. "Let her go." Colter stood in the doorway, coat dripping, eyes darker than the storm. His revolver was drawn, but low, steady. The man holding Lark turned, smirked. "Well, look what the wind blew in. The hero himself." Colter's voice was calm, but it carried something older than threat. "You've got 3 seconds to let her go and walk out clean." Scarlip laughed. "And if we don't? Then the next breath you take'll be your last good one." The silence after that was a living thing. Lark could feel it crawl up her spine. Scarlip squeezed once more, hard enough to bruise, then shoved her back. He turned toward Colter. "You think you scare me, Hayes? You were one of us once. Don't pretend you're the law now." Lark's heart dropped. "One of us." Colter didn't blink. "That was a lifetime ago." "Then you know what comes next," the man sneered. He moved first. The sound of the shot shattered the room. One bullet split the lamp glass. Another hit the piano, strings screaming like metal nerves. Maeve ducked behind the bar, yelling for Lark to stay down. Lark didn't listen. Her eyes were on Colter, calm, precise, every motion clean as instinct. 2 flashes, 2 men down. The third turned to run. Colter fired once more. The man crumpled near the door, the echo chasing him into silence. And just like that, it was over. Smoke curled through the room. The air smelled of oil and gunpowder. The piano gave a dying sigh as one string snapped. Lark stood frozen behind the bar, her hands trembling around the glass she hadn't dropped. Colter lowered the gun, eyes still locked on her. Maeve straightened slowly. "You just brought the sheriff down on this place like Judgment Day, Hayes." Colter holstered the weapon. "They weren't leaving alive either way." He looked at Lark. "You all right?" She nodded, though she could barely speak. "You killed them. They were already dead the moment they walked in." Maeve's voice cut through, sharp again. "You need to ride out now, before Bram gets here." "He'll hang you before he asks why." Colter's gaze softened when he looked back at Lark. "I can't leave yet." "Why not?" she whispered. "Because the man who sent them will come next, and I won't let him find you." Her chest ached at the quiet certainty in his voice. He wasn't boasting. He was promising. Maeve slammed her fan shut. "If you stay, you'll drag her down with you." Lark turned on her. "He just saved our lives." "And who's going to save him?" Maeve snapped. "Or you, when they ride back at dawn." Colter looked between them, jaw tight. "She's right. I should go." But when he stepped toward the door, Lark caught his hand. "Then take me with you." The words surprised them both. Colter stared at her, rain still running from his hat brim. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do. I'm tired of singing while the world burns around me." The wind howled through the broken window. Outside, lightning flashed again, painting the two of them in silver light, her hand gripping his eyes caught between warning and want. He whispered, "If you come, you don't look back." She nodded. "I stopped looking back the night you walked in." The storm rose, and the night seemed to hold its breath for what came next. If this story has found its way into your heartbeat, stay with it. The dawn ahead will demand everything they both tried to forget. The rain came harder once they were outside, as if the sky itself wanted to wash the town clean of what had just happened. Colter led the horse through the alley behind the saloon, one hand on the reins, the other wrapped gently around Lark's wrist. She didn't resist. Her breath matched his stride, quick but steady, fear and fire tangled together inside her chest. Behind them, Maeve's lantern flickered in the doorway like a farewell. "If you're going," she shouted over the rain, "ride fast and don't stop till the desert runs out of light." Colter nodded once without turning. "She'll be safe, Maeve." Maeve's voice broke through the wind. "No one's safe with ghosts at their heels." They rode hard out of Ember Creek. The mud flew up behind them, the world reduced to flashes of lightning and the drum of hooves. Lark clung to him, her cheek pressed against his soaked coat, heart hammering against his back. She could feel every breath he took, the power in the muscles beneath his shirt, the quiet control that had kept them both alive. For miles they said nothing. When the rain softened into mist, they slowed. The desert stretched around them, endless and whispering. The scent of wet sage filled the air. Colter finally spoke. "You sure you meant what you said back there?" Lark nodded against his shoulder. "If I didn't, I'd have stayed behind and watched them bury you." He gave a low chuckle, the sound half pain, half wonder. "You've got a sharp tongue for a saloon angel. And you've got a death wish for a man who can shoot that straight," she said softly. He pulled the horse to a stop near a low ridge. The clouds had broken, and the moon came through pale and wide, spilling silver over the land. Colter dismounted first, then helped her down. His hands were rough, but his touch was careful. She could feel the tremor under his calm, the kind that came from holding too much steady for too long. They found shelter beneath a bluff of red rock where the rain couldn't reach. Colter unpacked his saddlebag, striking a small flame from flint. The fire caught slow, then grew bright enough to paint their faces in amber. Lark sat across from him, knees drawn close, her hair damp and curling against her neck. "You didn't have to save me," she said after a while. "I didn't plan to," he answered, "but then you started talking, and it felt like the first good thing I'd heard in years." She smiled faintly. "That's not a safe reason to stay alive." "No," he said, "but it's a reason." The fire cracked. In its glow he looked different. Younger somehow, but wearier too. She studied the small scars along his knuckles, the faint mark above his collarbone, the eyes that carried both violence and grace. "Those men," she said quietly. "They said you were one of them once. Is it true?" He didn't flinch. "Yeah, long time ago. Before I learned that gold ain't worth what it costs to carry." "And what's it cost you?" He looked at her across the flames. Everything that ever felt like home. Something in her chest broke at that, not from pity, but recognition. She reached for a stick, stirring the fire. "Maybe that's why you walked into mine." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped. The horse snorted softly in the dark. Then Lark said, "You ever think about what comes after all this running?" He smiled without humor. "A hole in the ground, maybe." She shook her head. "No, I mean, if you could stop, if you could start again." He looked at her as though she'd said something dangerous. "Start again?" "Yes." Her voice trembled slightly. "I've been singing the same songs for years, for men who drink them away by morning." But when you walked in, I started to believe maybe I could sing for someone who'd remember." The silence that followed felt alive. Colter leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the firelight drawing gold lines down his face. "I remember," he said quietly. Her eyes lifted to his. "What do you remember?" "The way your voice stopped the whole room like prayer, the way you didn't hide when the thunder hit." He paused, searching her face. "And the way you looked at me after I pulled the trigger, like I wasn't a killer, just a man trying to make the world quiet again." Lark swallowed hard. "Maybe that's what you are." He shook his head. "You don't know the half of me." "Then show me," she whispered. Colter froze. The fire crackled between them, heat moving through the air like a living thing. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His thumb traced the edge of her jaw, slow and reverent, as if memorizing something fragile. "This ain't wise," he said, voice rough. "Neither was staying behind," she murmured. Her breath caught as he leaned closer, the smell of rain and smoke and saddle leather filling the space between them. His lips hovered near hers, close enough to feel, not enough to claim. Then, with a quiet exhale, he pulled back, staring into the fire. "I can't," he said. "Not tonight." "Because of me? Because of what's coming?" Lark blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He tossed another piece of wood into the fire. Sparks rose into the dark. "They weren't just after the money. They were after what's inside it." "What's inside it?" she asked. "Letters," he said, "from a railroad company in Denver. Proof they paid the wrong men to bleed the land dry. Someone's trying to bury it all, and I was fool enough to dig it up." She stared at him. "You're not just running from the law." "No, I'm running from men who write it." The firelight flickered across her face. "And now they'll come for you." He looked at her, quiet and certain. "For me, for you, for anyone standing too close." Lark felt the chill crawl up her spine. But beneath it, something else moved. Not fear, but purpose. "Then we don't run," she said. "We ride where they can't follow." He frowned. "You know a place like that?" "Yes," she said, a small smile breaking through. "Out past the dry mesa. My father's cabin." "Nobody's used it in years." Colter watched her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then that's where we go." He fed the fire one last time and leaned back, the glow softening his face. Lark curled into her blanket, the sound of the wind shifting to something gentler. Somewhere between the crackle of flame and the beat of their hearts, sleep took them. But it wasn't peace. Dreams came, heavy and hot with memory. And when dawn rose over the desert, neither of them knew the world they'd wake to would already be burning. If this story has stirred something deep and restless inside you, keep listening. The desert's silence hides more than it reveals, and dawn will test what their hearts dare to hold. Dawn crept over the desert like a secret told too softly. The horizon burned pink and silver, washing the world in a quiet that didn't belong to peace, but to waiting. Colter stirred first. Years on the trail had trained him to wake before the sun. He rose slow, careful not to wake her. Lark slept curled beneath her blanket, one hand resting near the edge of the dying fire. Her hair had dried in soft waves through the night. The pale morning light touched her face, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked weightless. No stage, No crowd, no fear, just a woman who'd forgotten to guard herself. Colter crouched near the saddlebag, checking the revolver and the packet of letters inside. The satchel was small, but the words within could bring down men too powerful to touch. He'd thought about burying it, letting the desert keep the truth, but he couldn't. Not anymore. Not after she'd chosen to ride beside him. Lark stirred, blinking against the light. "Morning," she murmured, voice rough from sleep. He turned toward her. "You should rest a little longer." "I've been resting all my life," she said, stretching. "Time to start moving." He smiled faintly. "You talk like someone who never learned to be afraid." "Oh, I'm afraid," she said, meeting his eyes. "I just don't let it drive." The wind shifted, bringing the smell of mesquite and dust. He saddled the horse, then helped her up behind him. Her hands slid around his waist again, and the closeness hit him like a memory he'd never had. They rode east, toward the dry mesa. The land grew wild as they traveled. Sharp ridges, ghost towns, stretches of emptiness so wide it made a soul feel small. Every so often, Colter glanced over his shoulder, scanning the horizon. Lark noticed. "You think they're following?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." By midday, the heat was climbing. They stopped under a sandstone arch where the shade fell like mercy. Lark slid off the horse, stretching her legs. "You always live this way?" He handed her a canteen. "Always is a long word, but I've been running most of mine." "From what?" "From the kind of man I used to be." She studied him. "And what kind was that?" He hesitated. "The kind who'd take a job before asking who it hurt." "And now?" "Now I count the cost before I pull the trigger." She took a drink, then passed the canteen back. "Maybe that's what makes you different." "Different don't buy forgiveness." "Maybe it earns it," she said softly. He looked at her for a long moment, then looked away. The sunlight caught the dust in her hair, turning it gold. Something inside him shifted. The same slow ache that had started the night she sang about second chances. They mounted again. By late afternoon, the mesa came into view, a jagged stretch of red cliffs and scrubland, carved by time and silence. Lark pointed toward a narrow ravine. "The cabin's through there. My father built it before I was born. It's not much, but it's safe." They reached it just as the sun began to fall. The cabin leaned against the cliffside, small and lonely, its roof half swallowed by ivy. The windows were dusty but intact. Colter dismounted first, checking the door, the tracks around it. "Nothing recent." He nodded. "You weren't lying. Nobody's been here in a long while." Inside, the air smelled of cedar and old paper. Lark brushed her hand along a shelf, dust scattering like ghosts. "Feels strange," she said quietly. "Like the past is still sitting in the corners, waiting to be noticed." Colter knelt near the hearth, stacking kindling. "Then let's give it something new to remember." When the fire caught, the room came alive. He found a tin of beans and a few dried goods in his pack. They ate in silence, the kind that felt companionable, not empty. When the meal was done, Lark leaned back against the wall, staring at the flames. "Colter," she said after a while, "what happens when the men chasing you find this place?" He poked the fire with a stick. "Then I stop running. And if they don't stop, then I make sure you get out before they do." She shook her head. "No. If this is your fight, it's mine too." He looked up sharply. "You don't owe me that. I don't do it because I owe you. I do it because you're the first man I've met who'd rather save a stranger than himself." He stared at her, speechless. The firelight painted her in soft gold, every word pulling him closer to something he didn't dare want. "You shouldn't talk like that," he said finally. "Why not?" "Because I might start believing it." Her lips curved in a small smile. "Maybe that's the point." For a moment, time stilled. The flames crackled low, shadows breathing along the walls. Colter's hand brushed hers where it rested on the floor. Neither of them pulled away. Then she whispered, "Colter." He met her eyes. "You don't have to keep fighting the world alone." He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that a man like him had no place beside a woman like her, but the words wouldn't come. The only thing that came was a quiet truth. "You make me forget I ever had to." The fire between them shifted, its glow deepening to the color of sunset. She reached out first this time, her fingers tracing the scar along his cheekbone. His breath caught. For once, he didn't stop her. Their lips met like the first rain after drought, slow, certain, necessary. The world outside vanished. All that existed was the warmth of her skin, the taste of smoke and sweetness, the sound of two hearts remembering what peace felt like. When they finally pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said. "But I'm done fighting it." The firelight flickered, soft and forgiving. Outside, the desert wind moved gently through the brush, carrying the scent of rain far away. And in that small cabin under the cliff, the outlaw and the singer found a moment of stillness that neither had ever been allowed to keep. But somewhere beyond the ridge, another campfire burned, and 3 riders watched its smoke rise against the darkening sky. If this story has found a heartbeat that sounds like your own, stay near. Their peace won't last long, and the next dawn will demand a choice that love alone can't escape. The fire had burned down to embers when the sound came, soft, steady hoofbeats in the dark. Colter's eyes opened instantly. He was off the floor, gun in hand, before the echo reached the cabin walls. Lark stirred beside him, half asleep, then froze at the sight of his face. "What is it?" she whispered. He lifted a hand, silent. Listened. The rhythm was wrong, too cautious, too deliberate. Not a drifter, not a coyote spooked by light. Men, moving slow to stay unheard. He crossed to the window, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. The moon was high enough to silver the ridge. 3 shadows crept along it, their shapes small but sure. "They found us," he said quietly. Lark's heartbeat turned cold. "How?" He slid the revolver into its holster and reached for the satchel. "Men like that don't lose a scent, not when gold and blood are tied to it." She grabbed his arm. "Then we run." He shook his head. "Not yet. The trail's too narrow at night. They'd track the horse by the prints come morning. We hold till dawn." Her eyes darted toward the window. "Colter, there's 3 of them." He met her gaze, calm and sure. "I've faced worse odds with less reason to win." She wanted to argue, but his steadiness stopped her. Instead, she nodded and went to the corner where he'd left his saddlebag. Her hands shook as she checked the lantern wick and found an old knife. He gave a faint, approving nod. "You've got grit, Lark Mercer." She tried to smile. That's what Maeve used to say when she meant trouble. The hoofbeats faded, replaced by silence, the kind that waits, heavy with breath and decision. Colter knelt by the fire, snuffing it out with his boot heel. The room sank into shadows. Only the moonlight through the window gave them shape. He took her hand. "When they come, they'll circle the ridge first. Try to smoke us out. You stay low. If I tell you to run, you don't look back." She stared at him, refusing. "You said we'd stop running." He looked down at her fingers wrapped around his. "Sometimes stopping means standing your ground." Minutes stretched thin. The night moved slow. Then a whistle, distant, sharp. The sound of men signaling to each other. Colter drew his gun. "Here we go." The first shot cracked the silence. It hit the outer beam, splintering wood. Lark gasped, but didn't scream. Colter returned fire. 2 rounds, measured, clean. The echoes rolled across the mesa like thunder trapped in stone. Outside, a man cursed. Then came the scrape of boots on rock. "They're moving closer," Lark whispered. "Good," he said. Closer means careless. He waited until the second man appeared in the doorway silhouette, then fired once. The figure dropped, heavy and final. The others scattered. One yelled, "You can't hide forever, Hayes." Colter smiled grimly. "Not hiding." The next shot came through the window. Glass shattered. Lark ducked, covering her head. He fired back, hitting the edge of the ridge where the muzzle flash had been. The air filled with gunpowder and dust. Then silence again. He reloaded quick, hands sure. Sweat rolled down his neck. Lark crawled to his side, clutching the knife. "They'll come from behind," she said. "There's a path by the rocks." His eyes met hers, surprised. "You remember? My father taught me the back way out. He used to say, 'Always leave a road for the wind.'" He nodded. "Show me." They slipped out the rear door, staying low. The desert glowed silver blue, the wind carrying every breath they took. At the ridge's edge, Lark pointed. "Down that slope." "There's a dry riverbed. It'll hide our tracks till morning." They were halfway down when a shot whined past her ear. She stumbled, gasping. Colter caught her arm, yanking her behind a boulder. 2 men appeared above, firing into the dark. Colter leaned out, shot once, then twice. 1 man fell. The other fired blind, his bullets sparking against stone. "Stay here," Colter said. "Don't you dare." But he was already moving, low and fast. Lark's breath came hard. Every sound cut sharper in the dark, the click of the hammer, the scrape of boots. Then silence again. When he returned, his gun smoked faintly. "It's done," he said, "for now." She stared at him, trembling. "You killed again." He holstered the weapon slowly. "I did what I had to." Her voice cracked. "And how many times until it stops costing you?" He looked away. "Every time costs. That's how I know I'm still human." Her anger softened, replaced by something raw. She stepped closer, her hand on his chest. "Then don't do it alone anymore." He caught her hand, pressing it flat against his heartbeat. "You don't understand, Lark. They'll keep coming. I can't keep you safe if—" She cut him off. "I didn't leave Ember Creek to be safe. I left to be alive." Something in him broke then, quietly, cleanly. He pulled her into him, arms tight, his breath against her hair. For a long moment, the world was only that, two lost souls holding on while the desert watched. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that wasn't fear. Once we reach Dry River, there's a station house. A man there owes me a favor. If we can get the letters to him, this ends. And after that? She asked softly. He looked out over the dark horizon. After that, maybe I stop running. Lark nodded, her head against his shoulder. Then we ride at first light. He tightened his hold, whispering into her hair, if we make it that far. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of smoke. The cabin burning behind them, devoured by fire. Lark turned to watch the flames rise, reflected in her eyes. We can't go back now. Colter shook his head. No, but maybe that's what freedom looks like. Nothing left to burn but tomorrow. They stood there until the fire dimmed to embers and the stars took their place again. If this story has kindled something fierce and tender in you, stay close. The dawn ahead will bring both salvation and ruin, and their love must face what the fire left behind. By dawn, the world smelled of ash. The smoke from the cabin had drifted east, faint and blue against the waking sky. The desert stretched out in silence, wide, endless, waiting. Colter and Lark rode side by side through the dry riverbed. The horse moved slow, careful on the loose stones. Every step sounded like a secret the land already knew. Lark's dress was torn at the hem, her hair tangled from wind. She didn't complain. Colter watched her from the corner of his eye, the way she held her chin steady despite the exhaustion. You should rest soon, he said. I will when you do. He smiled faintly. You always have to get the last word? Only when the first ones don't make sense. They rode until the sun cleared the ridge. Then Colter pulled up, dismounted, and scanned the horizon. Nothing but sand and sky. He tied the reins and crouched by a patch of scrub. We'll stop here for a bit. Lark slid off the saddle, her legs shaky. How much farther to Dry River? Half a day, maybe less if the horse holds. And the men chasing us? He looked toward the distant smoke. They'll be coming fast. She sat beside him, brushing dust off her skirt. Tell me about these letters. He exhaled, resting his elbows on his knees. A railroad baron named Dalton Crane. He's been paying bounty riders to clear land, burning out families, stealing claims. The letters prove it. Names, payments, orders, enough to hang him if they see daylight. Lark's voice softened. And you took them. Stole them, he corrected, from the man who hired me to protect them. So that's what this is, she said. You turning against your own? Guess so. Her eyes met his. Then maybe it's not running you're doing. Maybe it's redemption. He smiled without humor. Redemption don't pay much. It pays in breathing, she said. He looked at her then, really looked. The morning light caught her eyes, clear, fierce, full of the kind of hope he'd forgotten how to wear. You talk like someone who still believes in things. I have to, she said softly. If I stop, I'll sound just like you. He wanted to laugh, but something in his chest ached instead. For a long moment, the only sound was wind moving through the brush. Then Lark reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold, but sure. When we get to Dry River, what happens? I give the letters to a man named Bishop. He runs the telegraph office. He'll send them east, to Denver. Then I disappear. And me? He hesitated. You go back. Maeve'll keep you safe. She shook her head. There's nothing left to go back to. He turned to face her. Lark. No. Her voice broke, but she held his gaze. You keep telling me to run or hide, like I don't know what that costs. But I've been hiding my whole life, Colter, behind songs, behind smiles, behind other people's stories. I'm done. He swallowed, looking away toward the horizon. If you stay, you could die. If I leave, I'll never live. Something inside him shifted, like a gate unlatched after too many storms. He pulled her in without thinking, his arms wrapping around her, her heartbeat against his chest. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. Maybe not, she whispered. But you've earned it. They stayed like that for a long moment, the desert wind moving around them. When he finally let go, the air felt thinner. We should move, he said. Sun'll bring heat soon. They rode on. Hours passed. The land opened wider. By late afternoon, they reached the ridge overlooking Dry River, a cluster of buildings faded by dust and years. A telegraph pole stood crooked in the wind. There, Colter said. Bishop Station's near the edge. Lark shaded her eyes. Doesn't look like much. It's enough. They started down the slope, but halfway there, Colter stopped. Tracks, fresh ones, 3 horses, heavy riders. His jaw tightened. They beat us to it. Lark's pulse quickened. What do we do? He scanned the trail. We don't go straight in. There's a cut along the bluff. We'll come around the back. They dismounted, leading the horse along a narrow path. Every step ground small stones underfoot. When they reached the edge of town, Colter peeked around the corner. 3 men waited by the telegraph office, rifles propped, hats low. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, turned, and Colter froze. Dalton Crane, the man he'd once worked for, the man who'd ordered him to protect those letters. Lark saw the change in his face. That's him, isn't it? He nodded. Yeah. What are you going to do? He looked down at the satchel in his hands. End it. She caught his arm. Colter. He looked at her, and the hardness in his eyes softened just enough to break her heart. If I don't finish this, they'll never stop. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone. Lark's voice trembled. Then I'm coming with you. He shook his head. No, stay with the horse. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, I'm coming, she said again, firmer. You're not walking into that alone. For a long second he just looked at her. Then he nodded once. All right, he said quietly. But stay behind me. They moved down the slope, slow and silent, the air thick with heat and dust. When they reached the edge of the street, Colter drew his gun. Crane's men laughed about something, oblivious. Colter stepped out, voice low, but carrying, Crane. The laughter stopped. The man turned, smile fading. Well, hell, Hayes. I was just wondering when your ghost would catch up. Colter's voice was steady. I've got what you paid me to keep safe. Only difference is I'm giving it to the law instead. Crane's grin returned, cruel and sharp. You always did have a death wish, boy. Lark's pulse thundered in her ears. The world seemed to slow. The light, the dust, the air. Colter lifted the satchel. "This ends now." Crane's hand moved toward his gun. Lark whispered, "Colter." Then the street erupted in sound. The first shot missed. The second didn't. Colter stumbled, one hand clutching his side, but he didn't fall. He fired back, once, twice, until Crane's men hit the dirt and the echo rolled away into the distance. Crane fell last, dust rising around him like smoke. When the silence came, it was heavy and holy. Lark ran to him, catching him before he dropped to his knees. "Colter!" He gritted his teeth, blood dark against his shirt. "It's all right. I've had worse." "Don't lie to me," she said, voice shaking. "You're bleeding bad." He tried to smile. "Then sing something. Make it worth it." Her throat tightened. She couldn't find the words, so she held him, rocking him as the wind moved through the empty street. He looked at her then, not as a man dying, but as one who'd finally stopped running. "Lark," he whispered, "tell me what home sounds like." She pressed her forehead to his. "It sounds like your heartbeat." He closed his eyes, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. Far off, thunder murmured again. If this story has settled deep beneath your ribs, don't let go yet. The dawn has one more truth to give, and every Western tale deserves its quiet redemption. The desert held its breath. Dust drifted through the air like slow-moving smoke. Lark knelt beside Colter, her hands pressed against the blood blooming through his shirt. His breath came shallow, each exhale trembling against her palm. "Stay with me," she whispered. He blinked, eyes finding hers. "You still singin'?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "Only if you're still listening." He tried to smile, the ghost of it soft and tired. "Ain't got anywhere better to be." She tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it to the wound. "You're not dying out here. You hear me? You got a promise to keep." "What promise is that?" "That we'd see the sunrise together." He looked past her, where the horizon was just starting to glow, pale gold bleeding through the edge of night. "Looks like we just might." Lark's throat tightened. "Then don't you dare close your eyes before it gets here." She turned when she heard footsteps. Bishop, the telegraph operator Colter had spoken of, stood in the doorway of the station, rifle in hand, face pale. "My God," he said, "what in hell happened?" "Help me," Lark said. "He's been shot." Bishop knelt, lifting the edge of Colter's shirt. "Bullet went clean through. Lucky shot, if you can call it that." He tore open his satchel, pulled out gauze, poured whiskey on the wound. Colter hissed, but didn't move away. Lark held his hand tight, whispering, "You hear that? Lucky." Colter's voice rasped out, "Never thought I'd need luck, long as I had a reason." "And what's your reason now?" she asked. He looked at her, gaze steady despite the pain. "You." Bishop bound the wound, worked fast, then said, "We've got to get him inside. Those men'll have friends." Lark nodded, her voice firm again. "Come on." "Help me lift him." They brought Colter into the small station, laying him on a cot near the back wall. Bishop poured water into a tin cup. "The telegram lines are clear," he said. "I can get those letters to Denver by noon." Lark took the satchel from where it had fallen near the dirt road. She brushed the dust off its flap, opened it, and stared at the neat stack of envelopes inside, each one the weight of truth. "Send every one of them," she said. Bishop nodded. It'll be done." When he was gone, Lark sat beside Colter again. The light through the window grew stronger, stretching across his face. His eyes followed it. "Never thought I'd live to see the sun rise clean," he murmured. "You'll see more than that," she said. He reached for her hand. His fingers were rough, shaking, but his grip held meaning. "You should go back to Ember Creek, Lark. Maeve'll need a singer." She shook her head. "Maeve's got a singer. What she doesn't have is me anymore." He gave a small, pained laugh. "You talk like a woman who's found her freedom." "I have," she said, her thumb brushing the edge of his hand. "You gave it to me." He was quiet for a while, staring at the window. The sky was wide now, the sun breaking fully over the ridge, turning the world to gold. Lark stood and walked to the door. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sage and rain. She closed her eyes, breathing it in, the air of a world washed clean. Behind her, Colter's voice came faint but sure. "Lark." She turned. His smile was slow, tender. "Looks like you got your sunrise." She walked back to him, knelt by his side, and kissed his forehead. "Then so did you," she whispered. For a moment, the world was still. And then he exhaled, long and deep, the kind of breath that sounds like release. His hand went slack in hers. Lark froze. Then she bowed her head, pressing her lips to his fingers, her tears falling against his skin. The wind moved through the open door, carrying dust and morning light across his face. She didn't cry loud. She just held him, rocking gently as the sun rose higher, gilding the cot, the letters, the small, quiet mercy of what he'd done. When Bishop returned an hour later, he found her still there. The telegram was already sent. "Denver got it," he said softly. "Crane's men won't touch another soul. You've done what he meant to do." Lark stood, her voice a whisper. "No, we did." She stepped out into the light, the desert stretching before her like a blank page. The horizon shimmered, endless. And for the first time in her life, she didn't need a song to fill the silence, because the wind already carried one, made of dust and heartbeat, and the promise of something eternal. As she walked toward her horse, she looked back once more at the station, the door open, the sunlight spilling across the floor. "Goodbye, cowboy," she said softly. "Rest easy now." Then she rode west, where the land met the sky, her shadow long and steady behind her. And somewhere far away, the story of Colter Hayes, the outlaw who chose truth over gold, began to spread, carried on telegraph wires and campfire tongues, whispered like a prayer beneath the western sun. Lark never sang the same way again. Her songs became quieter, deeper. Every note carried his name, every silence his memory. Because some love stories don't end. They just echo, through wind, through firelight, through time. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Share it, speak it, and keep this western fire burning for every soul still riding toward redemption.